What we experienced today as a team was the utmost disrespect, and total disrespect to us and the game of basketball. Still got the W though.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily podcast on fantasy basketball. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Fantrax and Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and as always you can find me on Twitter at redrock_bball. We're back to look at a Tuesday in the NBA where we're only 4 games on. I guess quite a disappointing day with some of the performances that were out there, but there's still stuff to get into, there's still stuff to talk about. And then what we're going to do is head across to Wednesday and preview all 10 games there, try and help you set a winning DFS lineup. So
let's get to it.
It's a good idea. The monstrous line of the night, it's Jimmy Harden. He had 34 points, he had 5 rebounds, he had 11 assists, he had 4 triples, he blocked a shot, and he was efficient as well, going 9 of 16 from the field. He was 12 of 12 from the free throw line, and I guess Harden this season is pretty much doing exactly what you want him to do. He is only ranked 3rd on the year. I had him as the number 1 guy heading into the season, but number 3 is still pretty good, and he's averaging 28, 8, and 12 with 3 triples, 1.3 steals. So, obviously some huge numbers. He's not right at the top of the free throw percentage rankings, which is where he's been over the last few years. Matt Smith tweeted this out yesterday. Kawhi Leonard is actually the highest ranking free throw percentage guy, Isaiah Thomas 2, and Jim Butler comes in at number 3, whereas Harden is number 10. So he's not quite that same impact in the free throw category that he has had in the past, but there's really not much to talk about with Harden. This is what he does. If he doesn't finish in the top 3 or 4, I'm going to be surprised this year. He could easily be number 1, number 2, number 3. And when you take a guy with your first or second pick, getting him to finish in the top 3 is it is exactly what you want. You don't want guys to fall. If he drops from 1 to 2, it's not a big deal. If he drops from 1 to 3, it's not a big deal. You just don't want the guy who went at pick 1 to drop outside the top 20. So Harden's just being as consistent as possible while adding an extra 5 assists a game over what he did last season, which is obviously a huge step up. So Jimmy Harden is your monstrous line of the night for Tuesday. The waiver wire line of the night, didn't really ever think I'd be mentioning this bloke's name in one of the awards, and that is Gerald Green for the Boston Celtics. Yes, he does play for the Boston Celtics. 19 points for Jezza, 3 triples, 5 rebounds, 1 assist, blocked a shot, went 7 of 10 from the field, hit both of his free throws, and I don't really know what to say about this. Green had been out of the rotation for a very long time, entered the rotation on Christmas Day, and had a decent game in his 12 minutes. 8, 4, and 1 there with 2 triples, a steal, and a block, and then obviously got ridiculously hot in this game. And the re-emergence of Gerald Green has forced Terry Rozier out of the rotation, and it's also limiting what Jaylen Brown can do, because if Green can stay hot like this and hit his shots, then he's a valuable option for the Celtics. But, the previous 7 games that he played before these last 2 of 6 for 33%, 0 of 2 for 0%, 0 of 2 for 0%, 2 of 11 for 18%, 1 of 4 for 25%, 0 of 1 for 0%, and 0 of 3 for 0%. So as you can see, over his previous 7 games, he had hit a total of 5 shots. That's not good. So yes, this has been a nice little run from Gerald Green. The shots have been falling, but we literally have not seen it at all this season. He just hasn't been that guy. He's hitting just 37% of his shots over the season, but 55% over his last 3 games. Averaging double figures in points, hitting 2 triples a game in that time frame. I wouldn't be getting too excited. You could look at the ranking and go, man, Gerald Green's ranked 105th. That's awesome. Yeah, it is. But is 55% shooting realistic for Green? Of course it's not. So you look at him in a 20-team league, maybe he can maintain a spot in the rotation ahead of Rozier, ahead of Jaylen Brown. That might be something, but going by what we've seen from Gerald Green so far this season, this shooting form at the moment is somewhat of an anomaly, and it's unlikely to continue, and then he doesn't do much in the other areas. So great performance, huge boost for the Celtics in this game against the Grizzlies off the bench for Green, but let's just chalk it up to one of those fluky sort of performances that probably doesn't get repeated all that often. If you want to hear more about Gerald Green and the Celtics, listen to Locked On Celtics. Of course, it is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We've got a podcast for your team every day. The guys on Locked On Celtics, the reigning Jays, which is John Corrales and Jay King. That's the guy. They're the two guys that host Locked On Celtics. Make sure you guys are checking that podcast out if you're a Celtics fan or if you're any other sort of NBA fan and wants to hear about what's happening from the Celtics fantasy-wise. How do you want to look at Amir Johnson's recent improved play? Al Horford, Isaiah Thomas, all those sort of guys across on Locked On Celtics. They'll have it covered for you. And also with any other team that you want to listen to across the Locked On Podcast Network, we've got a podcast that will suit you. So make sure you're checking that out. The young gun of the night goes to Sammy Dekker of the Houston Rockets. Dekker played some extended minutes in this one. It was a blowout and there was no Pat Beverly. He had 9 points, 11 rebounds, 1 3, 3 assists, 3 steals. And I've spoken about Dekker quite a lot this season. I've been very impressed with what he's done. He has dipped a little bit recently, and the minutes have dropped back down, and he got an extended look here with Beverly out. He's not really close to being a 12-team league guy. But what we've seen from him is when he gets, say, mid-20s in minutes, that the production comes. He's a good rebounder. He's been shooting the ball really well this season at 49% from the field and 35% from three. Obviously much better than what he did last season where he didn't take a single shot. He's looked impressive this season, and I do believe that, it's happened. He is overtaken Corey Brewer in the rotation for this team and could force his way at some point, maybe in the next year or two, into a starting role, whether that's ahead of Trevor Ariza or Ryan Anderson starts to break down. Dekker's going to have a role there. It is just a deeper league sort of situation at the moment. We're talking 18-team leagues, probably 20-team leagues, but Dynasty is where it's at for Dekker, and he has proven himself to be a useful rotation piece. Whether he ever becomes a starter, it's still up for debate, but I do see some flashes there with him, and he has been a reliable piece of what Mike D'Antoni's been doing in Houston this season. The dud of the night, it is, I believe it's a hat trick for Rod Hood. Not a good performance from Hood. 2 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist on 1 of 7 shooting. He has been honestly horrible over the last couple of weeks, ranked outside the top 300, scoring 9 points a game in 24 minutes with 2 rebounds, 1.2 assists, and 1.2 threes, shooting 37% from the field. He just doesn't look right. It's like he's, I don't know, it's like he's not fully recovered from this gastric distress that caused him to miss a couple of games. It's like he's got no energy. He's just way off, and he's been limited by numerous injuries this year, hamstring problems, this stomach issue he's had now. What do you do with Rod? I think in a 10-team league, he's not a guy that you need to own. You can own him, but you don't need to. In a 12-team, I still would be holding on because we know that he is better than this. He is significantly better than this. He's been better than this season. This latest run has been abysmally poor, not hitting threes at 23%, not hitting shots, not hitting free throws, not getting involved in anything really. But he is a better player than this, and his minutes will go up. And when he starts getting back to the 30, 31 minutes, we'll see 14, 15, maybe 16 points coming out of Rod, a couple of threes, 2, 3 assists, 4, 5 rebounds, maybe a steal a game, all that sort of stuff, which is what we would have hoped. But in 12-team leagues, not in 10-team leagues, not really someone that you absolutely have to be holding on to, just with the plethora of talent that's likely available out on your waiver wire. So check that out, have a look at who's around, but I have dropped Rod in 10-team leagues where I grabbed him, and you can probably do the same depending on who is around. But it hasn't been a good stretch, but this is, it can't get much worse for him. I guess that's probably the best way of me phrasing that. He's been fairly horrific. All right, let's get into these games now, break them down in a little bit of extra detail. The first one, the Memphis Grizzlies and the Boston Celtics. There was no Mike Conley, who was out with a toe issue, and Chandler Parsons was resting after he recovers from his knee problem. So Marc Gasol, he turned in a huge night. 26, 4, and 9 for Gasol, 2 steals, 3 blocks, 3 triples. It wasn't as efficient as probably he needs to be. But still, you're getting it done with a huge line, and that's sort of been the story for Gasol most of the season. Tony Allen, when someone is out for this team, Tony Allen always seems to step it up defensively, or offensively especially. 17 points on 9 shots, 8 boards, and 4 steals. He is a borderline standard league guy. I think that you still can own him, especially while Chandler Parsons is getting himself back in business. He sort of molds himself to whatever the team needs. They need more shooting, he'll shoot it more. They need more defense, he does that. They need someone to grab the boards, he does that. And he's producing at a fairly solid level this season, Tone Allen. So have a look at him, and he might be more than a steal stream specialist, which is where he's been for the last couple of years. But given the way that the Grizzlies team is running at the moment, there's value in him as a permanent fixture on your team. Zebo doubled and played 29 minutes, got some extra runs, 16 and 10, while only the 22 there for JaMychal Green, 8 and 5 with 2 steals and 2 blocks. So a nice night from Green. I don't believe that he is a guy that you would need to own in 12ers. And same with Zebo. That's a good night, but I don't think that you need, especially 10 teamers for Zach Randolph, I don't think that you need to hold Zach Randolph in a 10-team leagues. Jimmy Ennis started with Chandler Parsons out, only played the 22 minutes, 11 points with 3 triples. And if he's only getting 22 minutes in a night where Parsons is out, any sort of hope you had of him even maintaining 14-team league value is probably down the drain. No Conley, no other point guard, so Andy Harrison played 44 minutes, and the stats were okay. His play wasn't great, but 12, 5, and 6 with 2 steals are nice counting stats. 4 of 12 from the field and 4 of 8 from the line are obviously not ideal. Pretty poor true shooting on the night, but with Conley, he'll be back really soon, probably the next game. So that would have been great to stream Harrison in today, on Tuesday, to have those sort of numbers, because that's useful even in 12-team leagues. But moving forward, there's no reason to go and grab him based on this performance. Just a nice little fill-in. Not much else happening with the Grizzlies there. Let's talk Celtics. Jay Crowder scored 17 on 9 shots, so that's good, getting some offense happening. No steals, but 7 boards and 3 triples. Still just feels like he's just underachieving a little bit this season. Isaiah Thomas had 21 with 7 assists, hit all 8 of his free throws, while Avery Bradley had a big night as well. 23, 7 and 4, 2 steals, a block and a triple. Just continues to be very much an improved player this year. Al Horford got Gobert, 11, 4 and 5 with 2 blocks. It's always the risk when you go up against Gasol, when you go up against Rudy. He didn't get Gobert, sorry, is that what I said? He got Gasol, Gobert, one of those two guys that you go up against. The opposition centers get their stats pretty significantly reduced. Amir Johnson's trending up. 25 minutes for Amir, and he's played 25 a game over the last couple of weeks. 4 points, 10 rebounds, 2 steals. He's not a sexy ad, he's not a must-add guy, but if he's continuing to get these 24 to 25 a night, he's going to have 14-team league value, and it might even fit a 12-teamer, just with his ability to get some boards and get some blocks. So he's a name to watch. Not a name to get excited about, but a name to watch. Marcus Smart, after I wrote him off, I didn't really write him off, but after I was pretty down on him the other day, he's getting it going again. No Terry Rozier in the rotation. 29 minutes for Smart, 13, 4 and 6, 2 threes, 2 steals, 1 block. Still not shooting the ball really well, but in a punt field goal setting, you've got to own him in 12-10 leagues, I believe, because he is still doing enough in the rebounds, assists, the steals, hitting some threes, doing those in pretty significant chunks. And the field goal percentage is still under 40% for the year and for the last 2 weeks, but hitting those other numbers and hitting them in a pretty big way, or in an impactful way anyway. So he is a top 100 punt field goal guy over the last couple of weeks, and I'm sure your team could use that sort of contribution. Kelly Olynyk only played the 18 minutes, 5 and 7 there for Olynyk, and not much else happening with the Boston Celtics in a victory that they not needed, but it's always good to get a victory against an undermanned team, I guess. Oklahoma City and Miami, Russ Westbrook, another triple-double, got that in the third quarter. It was an empty triple-double, though, for Russ. 29, 17, and 11, for as much as a triple-double can be empty, but he had no threes, no steals, no blocks. That's what I mean by empty. You also hurt your free throw percentage going 7 of 10, but a really robust 11 of 22 from the field for Russ. So he has fixed that shooting issue recently, and that's still a huge line, but it would have been nice to get a couple of threes or a couple of steals in there as well. Steve Adams getting it done again. Only 23 minutes needed for Steve here. 15 and 8 with a couple of blocks. He was in foul trouble, so that limited him. And that meant we got a lot more Enes Kanter again. 33 minutes for Kanter. 19 and 8 with a steal. I think you got to own Kanter. Or not I think. You pretty much have to own him at this point. The minutes have been trending up in a big way, putting up really, really impressive numbers and doing it consistently. Let's hope he can stick with that sort of production. It is tough though. I don't fully trust Billy Donovan. I don't fully trust him to play him those minutes, but he's putting up good numbers at the moment, and this is what we've seen from him, all season, all last season, that in limited minutes he puts up numbers. He puts them up consistently, but it's just getting the minutes. But now there feels like this added confidence that Donovan has in him, and it's translating into good fantasy stats. And he could be a shock, top 50 guy end of the year if he gets bigger minutes. Now, there's no reason that's going to necessarily be the case, but it's trending in the right direction. So is Alex Abrines, who's hitting 43% of his threes over the last couple of weeks. He hit another 4 here, had 14 points in 22 minutes, blocked a shot, and he is what they want Anthony Morrow to be. Someone who can hit threes, but also can provide stuff defensively as well. Not a great defender, but he's better than Morrow, and he has been really, really fantastic for this team. For a team that needs shooting, he fits a role really nicely. Not someone you need to really pay too much attention to in standard leagues, but a name to be aware of, especially after struggling and being out of the rotation to begin the season. He's putting up some pretty consistent numbers now, and those threes, especially on light schedule nights like this, can be streamed in and you can use them. He's available basically everywhere. 20 teamers need to grab him. 18, 16 teamers, you want to have a look there to see if he fits on your team. Decent night from Jeremy Grant. He had 10 points in 24 minutes. I don't really love him. And Andre Robertson didn't do a huge amount. 1 point. And by not a huge amount, I mean he did nothing. 1 point with 3 boards in his 22 minutes. Really tough 12-team league own Robertson, in my opinion. Despite some of the defensive numbers, he is a tough guy to own in that sort of a format. Onto the Heat, there was no Goran Dragic. So Joshie Richardson made the start at point guard, and amazingly, he can shoot. We haven't seen it all season. He hasn't been able to shoot at all, but 37 minutes, 22 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, 2 triples, and he did it on 9 of 16 shooting, which is the impressive part. The minutes and the role have been there for him. It's just that it hasn't converted with the shooting. So let's hope that this is the kickstart that Richo needs. Is he a must-own guy in a 10-team league? I wouldn't go that far, but his upside's pretty high. His upside is top 100, and in a 12-team league, I would be looking to grab him now and just see how this goes. Obviously, there was no I was going to call him Doran Dragic. There was no Goran Dragic. There was no Dion Waiters, so they do impact Richardson. But as I said, the role's not the issue. It was the shooting that was the issue with Richo. And yeah, he played 37 minutes, but goes back to 32 instead of shooting 30%. If he shoots 45, 46%, which might be a stretch, that really helps what he can do because that role is going to be there. It's more about converting it. The Heat also made another change to their starting lineup. They brought Scooter Magruder in to replace Dragic. He played his 36 minutes doing nothing with them, 7 points. That's pretty stock standard for Scooter. And Derek Williams started in place of Joshie McRoberts, who is out indefinitely with some foot stress reactions issues. 9 and 2 for Williams in his 15 minutes with a steal. Hit all 4 of his shots. That's great, but we're talking 30-team leagues, maybe 20-team leagues with Derek Williams. James Johnson continues to be the best of the power forwards, but doesn't get enough minutes, which pisses me off no end. 16, 5, and 2 for Jimmy with 2 steals in 25 minutes. Wasn't great from the free throw line, but he has definite 14-team league value, and in 12-team leagues, you can look at him and you can own him, and if for some reason he gets 27, 28, then it's a definite. But the problem is despite having absolute crud at that position, Spoelstra just refuses to play him the 28 minutes that he really needs to be that fantasy guy. Not that Spoelstra gives a shit about his fantasy value, but I'm also out here telling you he's going to help the team by doing that. Hassan Whiteside was pretty poor, 12 and 8 in his 31 minutes, while Justice Winslow didn't hit many shots. In fact, just 2 of them in his 10 attempts, 7, 3, and 5, with 2 steals and a block. You love that he got 3 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and a block. That's fantastic. But the shooting is going to be a concern. So he's in that punt field goal percentage boat, much like Marcus Smart that we just talked about a little bit earlier on. The Houston Rockets, they traveled to Denver in a spicy rivalry with an inordinate amount of flagrants and techs and ejections in this game, and players waiting outside other players' locker rooms to fight them after the game. Trevor Ariza and Salah Mejri, shout out to you guys. Let's talk the Rockets. We've talked Jimmy already. Ryan Anderson had 22 points with 4 triples, actually added a steal and a block as well, and was very efficient. After a horrible start to the season, it's to be fair, he's picked it up, and He's shooting the ball better, he's scoring more, still does nothing in the other areas, and that's always the concern with someone like Anderson. Trevor Ariza, before his ejection, 9 and 7 with 3 triples, not a great night, while Eric Gordon had 13, 5 and 3, but no one needed to play big minutes for this team because they were in control fairly easily. The Rockets made a change to their starting lineup. They put Nene in as the starter to match up against Andrew Bogut, moving Montrezl Harrell to the bench. And as usual, when that news comes out, the aggressive people on Twitter, oh, screw my lines, F you, D'Antoni. But again, as I like to point out, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter that Nene starts. He's not going and playing 27 minutes. He started, he played 19. Harrell came off the bench, he played 26, which is basically exactly what they do in the other games. So Harrell didn't have a great night, 7, 2, and 1. But it wasn't because he got stiffed with his role or anything like that. And I think he'll be back starting in the next game. And I do think that Harrell is still a 12-team league sort of a guy. But you don't need to get overly worked up about changes in starting lineups like this situation here. Corey Brewer started as well in place of Pat Bev, 8, 3, and 1 in 20 minutes. Had 2 triples as well, but we're talking Corey Brewer as being a 20-team sort of guy. On the Mavs, Dirk, Andrew Bogut, They had their preferred starting 5 for the first time since the start of November. Dirk and Bogut played only the first half. Bogut, only 11 minutes, 0 points, but 6 boards, 2 assists, and 2 blocks. Still really useful. It's going to take him a week or so, maybe, I guess, to get back up to his full load of minutes. But even in, say, 20 minutes, which is what he might even play that regularly, he can be a useful factor in fantasy. High field goal percentage, decent rebounds, good blocks, solid assists. Probably more a 14-teamer, but he will fit with some 12-team leagues. Dirk, it wasn't a good Dirk night. Only 15 minutes, 7 points and 3 rebounds, 2 of 8 shooting. I think that you want to own Dirk in 12-team leagues. But the most encouraging thing for me, if I'm a Mavericks fan, is the play of Justin Anderson, who's been in and out of the rotation this season. He was hoped to take a big step forward. Didn't, but this is a good start. 13, 8, and 2, 2 triples, 1 steal, and 2 blocks. He's got 111 written all over him. He's a good wing player who can block shots. The shooting has been way off this season. He's regressed in his shooting, and he needs to take that up a notch to maintain a regular role in the rotation. He played the 21 minutes here, while Dorian Finney-Smith, who went to the bench, played 25. I think that the Mavs would really like Anderson to take that step forward and replace Finney-Smith as that first wing off the bench. Hasn't happened just yet. But this is definitely a good start. Anderson might be a guy that sneaks into the top 50 in the last month of the season, but his value is more your very deep leagues and your dynasty formats in a situation where Dirk retires. I think they'd like to get Anderson in there starting between the pencil and Wes Matthews. So this is a good illustration of what Justin Anderson can do. He just needs to obviously get more consistent with it. Wes Matthews had 19, the pencil had 21, but not many other stats for those guys. While it wasn't a great Darren Williams game. In just 23 minutes, he had 6, 3, and 6. The shooting wasn't there. Doesn't matter. You still need to own Darren Williams. Pierre Jackson made his NBA debut. He was drafted about 3 years ago, had Achilles issues, drafted by Philadelphia, and has been tearing it up in the D-League. The Mavs waived Jonathan Gibson today to make room for Pierre Jackson, but he only got into this game because it was a blowout, so I wouldn't be looking at him thinking he's carving himself into any role that 12, 14, 16, 18 team leagues are going to care about. 30 team leagues, sure, grab him, but he's not going to play every night. When JJ Barea comes back, him and Nick Brasino are just going to sit their asses on the bench and barely play. But it's good to see him get an opportunity in his first game and scored 7 points in his 11 minutes, and that's something he can do. He can fill it up and do that fairly consistently. So good to see Pierre Jackson out there making his NBA debut. Also, better mention Dwight Powell was the second leading scorer on this team, 13 points in 23 minutes, but no reason for me to consider him a 12-team league guy. The last game of the night was the Lakers and the Jazz. Gordie Hayward was fantastic. Huge dunk on Julius Randle as well. 31, 9, and 3 on really efficient 10 of 17 and 8 of 9 from the field, while Joey Ingles keeps it going. 13 points for Joe in 24 minutes, 3 triples, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, 1 steal. Crazy shooting. Ingles is a guy that, if you look at the recent numbers, he's a 12-team league guy. I don't believe that's the case, but he has been super important. He doesn't miss. He plays awesome defense on this team. He passes the ball well, and in a 14-team league, I'd be okay with owning Ingles. In a 16, I think he's absolutely definite. He's well ahead of Joe Johnson in this rotation. Gobert played 37 minutes, 12 and 11 with 2 blocks and a steal, but I'm probably burying the lead here because Derek Favors returned to the starting lineup. Now, it wasn't fantastic, but 22 minutes, 8 and 6 is a really good start. And from here on out, we might be seeing top 50 Derek Favors, which is what we've seen from him so many times throughout his career. Great to see him back in and getting that extra bump in his minutes. Trey Lyles only played the 13, while Boris Diaw played 23 minutes here. Shelvin Mack stunk a little bit as a starter. 9 points, 1 rebound, 3 assists in his 33 minutes. Hopefully we're getting George Hill back soon, and the news from Quinn Snyder is that when George Hill does return, he won't be on a minutes restriction, so that's good news. Mack has very, very borderline 12-team short-term value, but it's not very high. On the Lakers, Julius Randle was massive, 25 and 12, despite missing some late free throws that could have won the game for the Lakers. 25 and 12 with a 3 and a steal. Good numbers from him. He's been up and down this season, but more up than down. Lou Williams draws free throws in an infuriating way, but hits them, and that helps us for fantasy. 27 minutes for Lou, 22, 2 and 3, hit all 8 of his free throws, hit a couple of triples. He's not going away, but I don't think he will be as good as what we saw earlier on. A good Jordy Clarkson night as well, 12, 5 and 3 with a steal and a block, but a good Jordy Clarkson night this season is that's a good night. It's not and that's what we sort of hoped would be an average night, but that's not where we're at with Jordy Clarkson this season. He still only played the 26 minutes, while Lou Deng, he's in business. Lou Deng, 33 minutes, 9 and 9, triple one. I think he's a 12-team league guy, and I've said it before. I think you want to own him. Tom Robinson, 10 points in his 18 minutes. Brandon Ingram, please don't hold him in 12-teamers. There's no point. 5, 2 and 2 in 31 minutes, while Uncle P had a stinker 4 and 2 in his 23. Speaking of stinkers, D'Angelo Russell did that, airballed a game-winning shot, 2 of 11 from the field for 4, 1 and 4. A lot of people disappointed with D'Angelo Russell this season, and he has struggled at times. His shooting hasn't improved. It's at that 40% mark, which is where he was last season, and you would have hoped for it to improve. But he is still a guy that's ranked inside the top 75 this year, and is going through somewhat, had the knee issues which limited him. If anyone drops D'Angelo Russell, I'm all over him. I'm grabbing him. If someone wants to sell him because they're pissed off with him, then I'm grabbing him. I still do believe he's going to be a top 60 guy when all is said and done this season. He only played the 25 minutes here. He wasn't feeling it, and that's totally fine. When he's actively hurting with missed shots, no reason to play him 30. But prior to that, he'd been playing 30 plus most nights, and that's an encouraging sign for D'Angelo. You just wish he could sort of get let loose a little bit more from a fantasy point of view. But I do think that once we hit maybe mid to end January, we're going to have some pretty big D'Angelo Russell nights coming down the stretch. All right, that is all of Tuesday's action. It's time for a quick break, and then we're going to be back to preview the 10-game slate for DFS for Wednesday.
Now I had a dream of you on that cold September night. I had nothing left to look forward to. I thought you were all I wanted, but I never really knew just what you could do. Never want to leave you, 'cause I think it's worth to be alone. Times like this I wonder.
Alright guys, we're back. Let's talk DFS now. Starting with the perfect lines for FanDuel. Russ Westbrook at 58.9. So didn't get anywhere near getting his 5x value at 13,000, but on a night which was so weird in the NBA, he didn't need to be in that perfect lineup. And that's sometimes that happens with these high price guys. Depending on what else is around, you might need to just get them in there just because of what else is around. Now, I had him in one lineup and didn't have him in another one, and it was always a tough decision at that 13,000, but still returned 58.9 points, which is not far off. It helps that this perfect lineup had some absolutely brilliant performances from guys that you never really would have expected, and that would make it harder to fit him in a regular sort of lineup. The other point guard was Andy Harrison, who had 30. Shooting guards, Avery Bradley, 42.4, and Tone Allen at 35.1. So you see a couple of Grizzlies coming in there with Mike Conley out. Small forward, Sammy Decker, 31.7, and Gordon Hayward, 58.3. Power forward, Zebo, 30, another Grizzly. Julius Randle, 42.9, and Marcus Gasol, another Grizzly, 51.3, for a total of 370.6. And that lineup cost you $57,900, so left $2,100 on the table. Really tough to construct a lineup leaving that much cash on the table, and it would have taken a fair few leaps of faith to include guys like Decker and even Harrison you could make sense of, and most of the Grizzlies guys were worth a look, but the Sammy Decker one I guess is somewhat out of the blue. On DraftKings, Russ Westbrook, 67.75, Joshy Rich, 35.75, Justin Anderson at 33, Sammy Decker at 33.25, Randall, 46.5, Bradley, 43.75, Gordy Hayward, 50.25, and Marc Gasol, 54.5, for a total of 364.75, and that lineup used the grand total of $50,000, so every single dollar was accounted for on DraftKings. Let's now move into these games and try and help you guys set yourself up with the perfect lineup for Wednesday. The first game we're going to take a look at is the Indiana Pacers and the Washington Wizards. The Wizards are favored by 4 points here, and the total is 212.5. Injury-wise, Monte Ellis has been upgraded to questionable, so we might have a Monte Ellis return. Rod Stuckey is out with his hamstring injury. I don't think that really has too much of an impact DFS-wise, though. Let's talk point guard. Johnny Wall on FanDuel is at 9,500. He's just been consistently giving you this 45-point type of numbers, averaging 43 actually over the last three. Had 47 in the last game. Is averaging 45 the last few times he's played Indiana. So I feel pretty good about saying John Wall's going to go for 45 here in this game. And at 9,500, I think is a really decent way to spend some cash. Because your other high-priced point guards are Steph, who goes up against Kyle Lowry, or Chris Paul, who we don't know is going to play. So, if you're going big at point guard, which is always a decent way to go, Johnny Wall seems to be the guy that I would be looking at. The other point guards in this game, Trey Burke, Aaron Brooks. Well, Brooksy had a huge game in the last one, but I think that's tempting fate to do it again. Well, Jeff Teague is at 7,500.
My name is Jeff.
Now Teague was limited by Aaron Brooks, only played the 24 minutes and had 13 points in the last game. The matchup is not ideal. I think that Teague is a fade here in cash, but in tournaments, not sure his ownership's going to be high, so he could have a big one. So I do like him in tournaments, but I dislike him in cash games. Shooting guard, Braddles is at 6,700. His numbers haven't quite been living up to that amount over the last few. Did have 35 in the last game, and the matchup here is decently positive, so I can totally see using Beal in both cash and tournaments without him being a dead set lock or anything along those lines. But he is definitely worth a look. 6,400 for Braddles over on DraftKings as well, and the DraftKings scoring system suits him better, so I like him a lot better in the DraftKings on the DraftKings site. Wish I could play on those sites, man. Those prize pools are so enticing. Anyway, that's just me complaining about living in Australia and not being able to enter those prize pools. Such a first world problem. I was going to say third world problem. Such a first world problem. Let's talk the other shooting guards. Monte Ellis, no thanks. Marcus Thornton, obviously no thanks as well. Small forward, Otto Porter, 5,800, blew up in the last game, dropped to 49 on our heads. He's averaging 29 over the last 5. All it needs for them is to give him the ball, and hopefully last game said, well, let's just give Otto the ball, and that can translate into 30 points. He does everything efficiently. He boards, he gets steals. I do like Otto here, despite the $400 price rise over on FanDuel. He's actually risen by 600 over on DraftKings, but that doesn't dissuade me from using him over there. He's averaging 31 per game in the last 5, so I think he's a pretty decent guy to take a look at on both sites there. Paulie George has been disappointing. The salary is down now, 7,600 on FanDuel for George, but he is only averaging 30 points across the last 3. The Otto Porter defense is a real factor, and that means to me that Paul George is a GPP guy only. He is not a cash game play. I will not be having any of that. CJ Miles, no thanks. Glenn Robinson III, double no thanks. And Kelly Oubre is barely getting enough minutes to get on our radar. At power forward, Markieff Morris at 5,000. The matchup here is really, really positive for him. He had 27 in the last game. He's averaging 25.5 over the last 5. I can't see anything wrong with using Markieff. Now, he is $100 more expensive on DraftKings, the matchup is still as good, and I still think that he can maintain value on both sides. So I do really like Markieff Morris as a DFS play, not as a person or a player necessarily. Thad Young has also been playing well. He's at 5,200, so he is in play as well, averaging 31 across the last 3 games, which clearly exceeds value. He's a little bit up and down though, because if Paul George goes ball hoggy Paul George, then Young may not get enough touches, but it has improved over the last couple of weeks for Thad, and the numbers have been fairly encouraging. So 5,200 for Thad is fine. Hated on DraftKings at 5,800, that's way too high. I wouldn't be looking at him over on that site. Any other power forwards? Kevin Seraphin, Jason Smith, Andy Nicholson? No. Let's talk centres. Marcin Gortat is at 6,000. You know he's going to get 35, 36 minutes, maybe 40 minutes. It hasn't really been translating into big production, but we've seen a fair few centres have some big nights against Miles Turner, especially the bigger, stronger guys, and Gortat is definitely one of those players. 6,000 is a little bit... It's expensive on FanDuel, but it's not horrible. It's something I would definitely look at if you're spending limited cash at the centre position. 5,700 on DraftKings, same story. Really good play over on both sites. In fact, I think he makes the picks of the day for both sites when we get to that later on. Miles Turner at 6,300 has been decent, averaging almost or just a bit over 30 in the last 5 games. Yeah, a fairly neutral matchup. I think Turner is okay in cash. And he does have some tournament upside. We know he can go out there and have those 4-3-4 block games and go for 25 and 8. And really go big and have a 40 or a 50 pointer. So I like him in cash, and I do like him in tournaments as well. Al Jefferson, you've got to look at Al Jefferson, I think, and this sounds dumb coming from me who's been very anti-Al Jefferson, but at 3,800, he's averaging 19 points over the last 5. He grabbed 22 in the last one, and at 3,800, get your 20 points, get your 21 points, and it's value. It's where it needs to be. And yeah, that makes him interesting. He's at 3,300 on DraftKings. The same story. Get a cheap guy in and you can load up at some of the other positions. Anthony Davis, Johnny Wall, Kawhi, these sort of players that you can get in and get multiples of them. And Al Jefferson might be that guy. Now, I wouldn't be looking at it in cash. I'd more be looking at it in a tournament situation because you get 24-25 out of Al Jefferson there. That's a real boost for that sort of a small salary. And hopefully it enables you to get these other big names in who really start to go off. So don't totally discount Al, but don't also totally fall in love with him. The next game we're going to take a look at, Charlotte and Orlando. No spread release for this one yet. We are waiting on the status of Evan Fournier, who is questionable. Someone did mention to me, I don't remember who it was or when they mentioned it, they said, where do you get the injury information from that you've mentioned on the podcast? We have it all over on Basketball Monster. It's stuff that myself and Kyle and Ken and Matt do when the news comes out. We obviously catalog it, put it into our projections, and it all gets sorted onto Basketball Monster. So you'll see us tweet out information, but all this information is stored over on Basketball Monster. So on our DFS projection site, you can see a list of all the players who are in or out, or have got questionable, probable, doubtful tags. So that's where I'm getting all this information from. A person whose name I forgot that asked me that question. I believe I replied to you, but there's a shout out reply to everybody who may be wondering that question. Evan Fournier, yeah, the last 2 games he's missed, Jody Meeks has started, and Meeks has been pretty decent in that time, so he would be someone to pay attention to. He dropped 24 in the last game, but I hate that his salary's gone to 4,400 on FanDuel. That makes him pretty tough to use at that salary, even if Fournier is out. If we look at him over on DraftKings, he's at 3,900, so a much better price there, and if Fournier is out, then I would definitely look at him in a tournament on DraftKings, but 4,400 almost puts him at almost ceiling on FanDuel, so really don't like that. Let's talk point guards. Kemba is at 7,600, sort of a neutral matchup against the Magic. Kemba's been okay. I much prefer him at this price than the 8,000 that he was at maybe a couple of weeks ago. He is still at 8,000 on DraftKings, so that eliminates him from my consideration over there. But Kemba is averaging 37 over the last 5, and I think you should feel fairly confident that you're going to get 35, 36 out of Kemba here. And at 7,600, that's not bad value, so I would definitely look at him. Lord Alfred Payton flying, but unfortunately the salary is flying up. 6,300 over on DraftKings, 6,000 on DraftKings. 6,300 on FanDuel, but you can understand why, because he's averaging 31.5 on FanDuel over the last 5, 34 over the last 3. Yes, he's still coming off the bench, but Vogel mentioned that they might be looking to change that, and it hasn't really affected him playing 29 minutes a game over those last 5. The matchup here is perfect. 6,300 is just tough to swallow as a price for Lord Alfred. I do like him. He can go huge. We've seen multiple 45, 50-point games from him this season. So in a tournament, I wouldn't hate that. But in cash, spending 6,300 on Lord Alfred Payton, it just doesn't sit all that well with me. DJ Augustine, 3,700. He can go off, so he's not a bad tournament punt also. Ramon Sessions is nothing. Shooting guard, Jezza Lamb, 3,700 for Lammy. He had 25 in 22 minutes in the last game. Marco Bellinelli is out for Charlotte, so he gets the extra run. And the salary has jumped by $200, but it's not enough to worry me. It's jumped by $500 on DraftKings, but that still is not enough to worry me. You should be looking at 20 plus for Lamb. We know he's going to take his shots, and if he gets the extra run and takes Bellinelli's role, then he's going to put up some pretty decent numbers. So I do like him as that cheap wing guy. Evan Fournier at 6,100. Well, if he plays, I absolutely love it. I think it's a great spot if he plays, but we just don't know at this point. So hopefully we get some news in here that he's ready to go with no restrictions. But otherwise, obviously, you're not going to be using him. Nick Batum, 7,600, killing it at the moment, averaging 45 over the last 3. He is due for some sort of regression, but I would have no concern with using Batum in both tournaments and in cash games. He is absolutely flying. The matchup's fine, and showing himself to be a guy that when I get around to it, which will probably be, when will I do it? I might do it next week or so. When I look at who I want to be in the All-Star game, I reckon I'm going to have Batum on my list. But we'll see. He's been fantastic so far this season. Mick Gilchrist at 4,700. Again, a factor of no Bellinelli. He dropped 31 in the last game. He's averaging 29 over the last 3 in 33 minutes, and that's all to do with Bellinelli's absence. 4,700. I feel pretty confident of getting around 25 from Kid Gilchrist here, so lock and load with him. The other small forwards, Aaron Gordon, Jeff Green. Gordon was massive in the last one, had 37. He's at 4,300. That's a huge return on your investment. But how trusting can we be of Aaron Gordon? I think the answer is not very. He's at 4,900 on DraftKings, so that's a horrible price over there. Much better 4,300 on FanDuel. Strictly a tournament guy, that is it. Jeff Green is not even that really, despite him being a minimum salary player on FanDuel and getting his 24 minutes. He is averaging, in the last 5 games, 11 points in 26 minutes. He is not very good. Marvin Williams at 4,400. He's playing better, but he's not playing enough or not playing well enough for me to think that 4,400 is a good price for Marv. I don't like him on either side. There's, I guess, some upside with him, but I would rather, there's plenty of other guys that I would rather get into. Serge Ibaka's had a salary dip of $300. He's down to 6,300. He had a bit of a quiet game in the last one, but I don't think that's really, it wasn't really necessary for him to drop by that much in salary. So he is absolutely fine to have a look at and consider a player that you would use at power forward on FanDuel. And when we look at him at 6,200 on DraftKings, it's probably not quite as appealing, but it's still decent. The matchup's not perfect for him, but I still think that Serge is a solid cash play without really being much of a tournament guy. Centers, Nick Vucevic, Bismack Biyombo. Love Vooch, hate the salary, and hate the minutes. So I think that's a no from me, despite the positive matchup. Biyombo at 4,900 on FanDuel is okay. I think he's a decent cash center without any tournament upside, whereas Cody Zeller's been killing it. He's at 5,200. The matchup is actually pretty positive. Centers can do good stuff against Orlando. He's averaging 28 across the last 5. No reason why you shouldn't be looking at Cody Zeller and saying he can be my center. 5,100 on DraftKings for Zeller. Still the same thing. I like what he's been doing. He's averaging almost 30 points a game over there. So he is absolutely worth a look on both sites. Let's talk about the next game, and that involves the New York Knicks and the Atlanta Hawks. No spread currently released for this one. We don't know the status of a few players. We've got Courtney Lee, who is probable with a wrist problem. We've got Timmy Hardaway Jr., who's questionable with his groin, and Paulie Millsap, who's got that eye problem that he suffered in the last game, who is probable to play as well. So we hope to get all of those guys playing. Let's talk point guards. Derrick Rose is at 6,400. Rose has been putting up almost 30 or definitely more than 30, and actually 33 a night over his last 3. And the matchup is fantastic against Atlanta. You should attack Atlanta backcourts as much as you can in DFS, especially the point guard position. I don't know if Rose's upside is really there. I don't know if it's a real tournament, hey, he might get 50. But I feel pretty good about him getting 30. So he has a nice cash floor, and I think this is a real decent spot, or it's an awesome spot for him, to be honest. Dennis Schroeder, who'd been tearing it up, gets a shit matchup. The Knicks are really good at restricting what point guards can do. His numbers have been a little bit deflated, I guess, by his 16-point performance in that blowout against the Wolves. So when you look at his averages, they don't look that superb, but averaging 31 across the last 5, including a 16-pointer in there, makes me think that 35 for Dennis Schroeder is not a hard task for him to get to. So both of these point guards are decent without being spectacularly good. But you got to love Rose's matchup. That's almost a tipping point to me to go with a guy like Rose there. Now he's at 6,300 Rose on DraftKings, which is absolutely fine for him as well. While Schroeder, a little bit more expensive at 6,900, makes me like him a little bit less over on that site. Shooting guard, Courtney Lee, 4,000, doesn't really do anything, so that's a pass. And Timmy Hardaway, we won't be really using him either. Kyle Korver, Justin Holiday, no. Small forwards, Kent Bazemore's at 4,100. There's a reason why he's this cheap, because he's as up and down as they get. He could drop 30, he could drop 3. So fine with using Kent in a tournament. Absolutely, there is upside there. In cash, I don't think that's a really wise move. Tabo Cephalosha, on the other hand, I feel a little bit more confident with using him in cash. He's at 4,600. He's averaging 25 over the last 3, but he has had some moments of being up and down himself. So I'm not 100% locked in on Tabo on FanDuel as being that guy that's going to put up huge numbers. I also don't think he's a great option on DraftKings. Bazemore at 4,700 has had a $500 price dip on DraftKings, so that makes him a little bit more appealing there. But still, I'd probably look at both those guys as tournament-only players. Melo is at 7,800. He's been putting up 41 over the last 3. I think you should be fairly confident of Melo getting pretty close to 40 here again. There is somewhat of a risk in case there's the bad Melo shooting night, but I'm okay with Melo using him at that price if you don't want to take a Paul George or a Jim Butler or a Kawhi Leonard, who all have some negatives associated with their matchups. Yeah, Melo's not a bad guy to substitute in, especially if you want to be a little bit different in some of the tournaments. I don't imagine that Melo's ownership is going to be all that high. Power forward Paul Millsap, 7,800. He'll be better than the 13 that he put up in the last game, that's for damn sure. He's still averaging 35 over the last 5. 7,800 with a $400 price dip. I think that 40 points for Millsap shouldn't be too hard to come by. I love that he's dropped by $800 over on DraftKings, 7,400. So I think he is a worthy play on both sites.
Percentages.
He is at 7,700 over on FanDuel. He dropped 45 in the last game. That was the Christmas one. A huge performance there from him. Do we go back again? The Hawks are sort of a middling team against power forwards. I think that Porzingis is fine at that salary, but I wouldn't be locking him into cash lineups. I think he's more of a tournament guy, to be honest. Mike Muscala, no real interest in him. At center, Dwighty Howard, love it here, 8,000 for him. He's averaging 42 across the last 3. Dropped 40 in 21 minutes in his return game. I don't think Joakim Noah or Kyle Quinn give him too much to be too concerned about, so I think that Howard at 8,000 is a really nice option, and the 7,300 for him over on DraftKings is even better. So I think he's a great option on both sites. Noah, O'Quinn, Hernan Gomez, who knows what's going to happen with these guys. Now, Noah is averaging 27 minutes over the last 3 games, and at 4,300 averaging 24 points, it's not bad. But there's clearly risk associated with it, and the Dwight matchup is not encouraging. So I'll probably fade him. Kylo Quinn's dropped by $900 down to 4,600. Who knows what Kylo Quinn you're going to get, and the same goes for Billy Hernan Gomez. I would punt O'Quinn in a tournament, but that's really about it out of that center mess that is the New York Knicks at the moment. The next game we're going to take a look at, we've got Milwaukee taking on Detroit. The Pistons are favored by 3.5, which seems a little weird to me. The total is 199. Mirza Teletovic is listed as doubtful with a concussion that caused him to miss the last game. Let's start with point guards. Matty Dellavedova is at 3,900. He just dropped 31 in the last game on the back of a lot of assists, but had been pretty piss poor up until that point. The matchup is really good against Detroit for point guards. Daly at a really cheap price. There aren't many good cheap point guards out there in this slate. So if you want to go cheap at point guard, Daly's going to be your man, but it's really going to be tough to rely upon him in cash games. Reggie Jackson's at 5,400. That just feels about right for him. Get your 26, 27 out of him. The matchup is really poor, and that makes him a tougher guy to use, especially at that salary over on FanDuel. If we look at what Reggie's doing on DraftKings at 5,200 with their scoring system, it's a much better bet to have a look at him over there. He is averaging 27.5 points over the last 5, which at 5,200 is absolutely worth looking at. But a different scoring system suits him a little bit better over on that side. Malcolm Brogdon, who wasn't that great in the last game, he's at 3,800 and he's had a 32-point game in his last 5. He's averaging 25 over the last 3, so he is absolutely worth taking a look at. And strictly for tournaments, though, obviously he's not going to be a reliable cash guy. Shooting guards, Yanni, 10,300. Look, I'm not worried that the Pistons have a good defensive rating. I don't think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope is really going to be able to limit what Yanni can do all that much. I think at 10,300, 50 points should be fairly close. That should be where he is. He's at 10,000 on DraftKings, and again, he's averaging 55 over the last 5. I think you get another 50 out of him, so or at least another 50. So Yanni is absolutely fine to use at that salary. As for KCP at 5,600, the salary just feels too high for me. He's up and down. Not sure I really want to use him against the Bucks' length. Small forward Marcus Morris, 4,400. He had 29 in the last game, but yeah, even with that, he's still averaging just 20 over the last 3, 16 over the last 5. The matchup does suit him here. Small forwards, it can put up some numbers, but I think that you can find a better power or a better small forward out there on the slate somewhere. Mickey Beasley, minimum, no. And Tone Snell, do we expect him to shoot like he did last game? I'm going to answer for you and say no. He is at 3,800, dropped 28 in the last game. The matchup is not fantastic for him. Not interested in Tone Snell. Power forward, Johnny Lua. He's at 4,900. I feel like he's a pretty good cash guy. Hey, get me 25, John. And I think he will do that. His lowest score in his last 5 has been 21. So at 4,900, I do like Johnny in cash. Don't really like his upside too much in tournaments. The 5,000 that he is on DraftKings, a little bit more expensive, turns me off him a little bit more. 4,500, I'd be all aboard, but obviously we can't always get what we want. Jabari Parker is at 6,800. Not a great performance from Jabari in the last game. Has done poorly against Detroit in the past, and the matchup is not ideal. I think he's a pass at 6,800. He could easily get it, but I'm not confident in it. 5,600 for Toby Harris. He's been great since moving to the bench. Can he keep it up? There is definitely some sort of a risk associated with him because the 2 games where he did play that extra role, there was foul trouble, limiting guys like Lua and Morris, enabling him to get his run. So if everyone's out of foul trouble, what do we see from Toby? I think he's got decent tournament upside at 5,600, but not for cash. And the centers, Johnny Henson at 4,300. I want nothing to do with him at that price. Greg Monroe at 4,800. That price is also a tough one to really deal with. Whereas on the Pistons side, Andre Drummond at 7,500. We know that Drummond can be a tease, but as a big man playing the Bucks, it's one of the best situations out there, so he is absolutely someone that you can look at. I would feel a lot more comfortable with it doing it in tournaments. I love that he's only 7,100 over on DraftKings as well in a really positive matchup. So I do like Drummond, but more a GPP type of player. Let's move on to the next game now. We're going to look at the Brooklyn Nets and the Chicago Bulls. We've got Lopez on Lopez here. The Bulls are favored by 9.5 and the total is 213.5 points. We need to check on the status of Jeremy Lin for Brooklyn, and we need to check on the status of Dougie McDermott for Chicago. Both guys are listed as questionable. If Lin is out, Sean Kilpatrick becomes all the rage. Isaiah Whitehead gets a bump, and we get some more for Spencer Dinwiddie. If Dougie's out, then more minutes go to Nick Mirotic, most likely, and some more to Jaren Grant also. So those guys come into play if those particular players happen to be out. Let's assume that they're in when we're talking about things now. Point guard, 5,700 for Rajon Rondo. He's been terrible. Use him at your own peril. It is a really good matchup, so he could go off, but it's hard to go off when your ass is sitting on the bench for the entire fourth quarter. So he's averaging under 23 points in the last 3 games, and at 5,700, that clearly doesn't cut it. So it's a tough one to rely upon here for Rondo, so I don't think I will. Lin at 6,300, definitely don't want to rely upon him even if he plays, so that's a no. Michael Carter-Williams, no thanks either. At shooting guard, Shawnee Kilpatrick's at 5,300. That salary's jumped by $700 over on FanDuel, which is a significant hike, and that makes him actually just back on Michael Carter-Williams. He's a $3,000 player on DraftKings minimum salary. I don't mind that in a tournament spot in case he gets a 24-25 minute run and puts up 15 or 16 points and really returns value consistently. So I think there's something to be said for him on DraftKings, but not at FanDuel at his $4,000 plus price. Sean Kilpatrick, the $700 price rise is not ideal. He's jumped by $800 on DraftKings, so the salary's up. If Lin is out, I'm all for it. If Lin is in, then I don't want anything to do with it. He put up 33 in that last game with Lin out halfway through, and that's more what we can expect from him when he has to be more of a primary focus. The other shooting guard, Dwayne Wade, 7,100, has been consistent, but just consistently sort of under where he needs to be. I hate the $400 price rise here on FanDuel. That doesn't make it all that enticing to me. He's at 6,600 on DraftKings, so that's a much better price. I could totally get behind using him on DraftKings. On FanDuel, it's just a little bit tougher. Joey Harris started the last game, put up 2 points. So starting doesn't mean everything, guys. And Randy Foye hit that game winner and contributed 7 points in total. So not much to look at with them. Jim Butler at 8,500. The matchup is fantastic for Jim. The $8,500 salary is not ideal, but the blowout risk, there is somewhat of a blowout risk. Vegas has got the spread almost 10. So that puts a little bit of concern in Jim, but I do like him in a GPP. But he has been a little bit up and down of late. Actually, that's not true. He's actually been sort of down. His highest score in his last 5 games has just been 37. And at 8,500, you need him to be way better than that. His lowest score has been 31, so a decent-ish floor, but not an 8,500 floor. I do think that this is a really good spot for him, and I do think that he can put up some decent numbers, but it is a tough one to trust in cash situations on both sides. I would say the same thing. Rondé averaging 21, but FanDuel, in their wisdom, have jumped him to 4,200, making him tough to use. He's at 4,000 on DraftKings. Really don't feel that confident about using him on either side. Bojan Bogdanovic dropped to 34 in the last game. In his new bench role, he is as fluky as they come. So I think that Bojan is a guy that you might put in a tournament, and that's really about it for him. Power forwards, Taj at 5,000 hasn't been really getting it done. That salary is a little bit high. The matchup here is really, really good. I don't trust it in cash whatsoever, but a tournament one is worth a look. And Nick Mirotic is the interesting one. He's at 4,500. He's averaging 25 over the last 5. He's averaging 27.5 over the last 3 on FanDuel. And if Dougie McDermott's out, then he becomes a really interesting player in a fantastic matchup. Now he's at 4,600 on DraftKings with a $700 price rise, so that's making him a tough guy to use. But if McDermott is out, then Mirotic comes into play. Absolutely comes into play with a guy that could easily drop a 30, and I won't be having him in many lineups, but he has to absolutely be considered. Trevor Booker's sliding, but the salary hasn't. 5,300 for Booker makes him a no-go. At center, Brook Lopez and Robin Lopez. Robin's at 4,700, and he's coming off a 25-point game. He hasn't been fantastic, but his matchup is really good. Brook does allow opposition centers to put up good numbers. Now, whether Robin can do that against his brother or not remains to be seen. He hasn't had a great history going up against his brother, but this is a decent spot to use Robin, I think, at this salary with the ability for him to get to 25 points. As for Brook, he's at 7,500. Just feels just a titchy bit expensive. I don't hate it. I think there's value there. I love him on DraftKings where he's 6,800. Can't get enough of that. That's a really, really good price. But 7,500 on FanDuel is a real tough one to swallow. He is averaging 33 over the last 3, but 38 over his last 5, and the minutes aren't too much of a problem for Brook anymore after that frustrating start to the season. Let's talk the next game. We're looking at the Los Angeles Clippers and the New Orleans Pelicans. We have got Chris Paul and JJ Redick are both listed as questionable with those hamstring injuries, so we need to obviously check on those guys. And I'll do this assuming that Chris Paul plays. If Paul is out, then we're looking at Rivers, we're looking at Felton. If Redick is out, we're looking at Crawford as well. So a few names to watch there. If Paul plays and he's right to go, it's a really good matchup. He's at 9,300. He's returning home. He does very, very well against New Orleans. So if everything is fine and he is ready to go, I can see using Paul, but I would look at it with that element of risk. I would have to say tournaments only. Drew Holiday at 7,000. The matchup against Paul is not fantastic. If Paul is out, then it's much better for Drew to get his 35 points, and I think that he can do that if Chris Paul happens to be out, but that's a situation to monitor there as well. Austin Rivers dropped 27 in the last game, but the salary's risen to 4,600. So unless Redick and Paul are out, then Rivers is a tough guy to rely upon, whereas Ray Felton's at 4,100 off the bench in the last game, had the 18 points, still played 31 minutes, so that's important that he's still got playing time. But Rivers has the ability to play in more spots, and he's probably the guy that I'd want to use even with that price rise. But it's tough. Timmy Frazier apparently out of the rotation completely, or not completely, like 5 minutes a game, so we'll pass on him. JJ Redick at 4,400. He's a decent tournament guy to have a look at, and I like him more if Paul happens to be out. But even then, he takes on a lot of Blake's usage, so 4,400 is a decent price in a tournament for JJ. Langston Galloway. Got hot in the last game, no doubt, and put up some decent numbers. He's a minimum salary player on DraftKings, and that could easily turn into value there. So have a look at him on DraftKings. When we look at Langston at 3,700 on FanDuel, a bit above minimum. Not sure his upside's quite there in that scoring system, much more suited to the DraftKings style. Bud Hield, no thanks. Etuan Moore, yeah, they're both 3,600, but I'll say no. And Jamal Crawford is up to $5,000, so we're only using him if Redick is out. Now, he is averaging 32 over the last three, and he is going to take a jump in usage with Blake out, but I think that salary has corrected too far, and it's to do more with the fact that Redick is out. So use Jamal wisely. He's had $1,000 price rise on DraftKings as well to 5,400. So that does make him a very tough guy to use over on that side. The small forwards, Solly Hill, Dante Cunningham, they aren't big fantasy producers, although both put up over 20 in the last game. Really tough to consider them here. Same with Wes Johnson, who started, although Wes had 21 in 20 minutes as a starter at 3,600. And in a tournament, I don't completely hate Wes Johnson. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. Luke Marmute, no. Power forwards, Mo Spates. It's just not happening for Mo. He's playing backup centre. Nothing is really changing with his role. He's had a couple of big games, but nothing that's sustainable, really. Tony Davis, 11,300. Love him here. He's got no defensive responsibilities, really. He's going to be playing at centre, so I expect a 50-point performance at least from Anthony Davis, and that makes him really appealing on both sides. I don't love him as much on DraftKings at 11,100 with their $50,000 salary structure. That's a pretty fair chunk of that salary, but much prefer the 11.3 over on FanDuel for Davis. Brandon Bass or Terrence Jones, just hard to rely upon them with minutes. DeAndre Jordan, $7,000, has really struggled to reach value a lot of this season. I think he's okay. The projections are okay with him, but on DraftKings he's not of interest, and on FanDuel he's of marginal interest. Let's move on to the next game. Where are we looking here? We're looking at the Phoenix Suns and the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs are favoured by a whopping 14.5 points, and the total is 213.5. So we're on huge blowout alert here, which is the concern with a lot of these guys, especially the Spurs guys. Patty Mills, he's at 4,100. Could get some extra minutes in a blowout, but very hard to predict or rely upon. In fact, a majority of the Spurs guys aren't going to be worth really looking at. Tone Parker had 27 on Christmas, but I don't think that's all that good. I don't think he's a great play here. Look, this is a great matchup against the backcourt, but who knows the way that things are going to run with the rotation. How many minutes is Parker going to get? What's Dejounte Murray going to get now? And they've waived Nicholas Laprovitola, so Murray has firmly ensconced himself in that number 3 point guard role. So that's something to pay attention to as well. But despite this being a great point guard matchup, the point guard options for San Antonio aren't fantastic. For the Suns, we've got Eric Bledsoe, obviously. He's at $7,500. The salary's dipped by $700, which is a pretty significant dip. And that's because he hasn't been producing at the level that we would like him to produce. He's at $7,000 on DraftKings, so I do like that salary much more over there, and that scoring system really likes him. So despite it being a Spurs matchup, I think that you can look at $7,000 Eric Bledsoe on DraftKings. On FanDuel at $7,500, his numbers have been pretty good lately. The matchup's okay. I think there are better point guards out there on the slate than Bledsoe on Wednesday, but he's totally not a guy to completely rule out. Shooting guard Devin Booker at $5,600. Look, his lowest score has been 25, so it's a really decent floor over his last 5 games. So I think that Booker is fine. I think he's got cash. I think he's got tournament upside, and I think he's got some decent cash stability. So I like him here. The defense part doesn't worry me too much. Even if he just drops a 26 or 27 point game, that's getting value. So I do think that Booker can do that. Dan Green, minimum salary, no thanks. Brandon Knight, $4,300. He is a tournament punty type of guy, but I wouldn't be looking at it really in this game. Small forwards, TJ Warren has dipped by $9,000 over on FanDuel and by $700 over on DraftKings. So pretty significant dips. He's priced at $4,700 on both sites. The matchup is horrible with Kawhi, so that's a reason to stay away. But in a tournament, in case he gets a hold of Kawhi, which is not likely, but it is possible, at that salary, that if he gets 30, 33, 34 points, which is not absurd for TJ Warren, it could easily work out. But it is tough to rely upon. PJ Tucker, we won't have any dealings with him. Kawhi, you love Kawhi, love the matchup, but instead of 35 minutes, what if he plays 30? That's the concern, and 8,500 is a pretty decent chunk. I don't mind him in a tournament. His ability to get 40 plus is obviously really high, and he's averaging 49 in the last 3 on DraftKings, and that makes him really appealing over there. But the blowout risk is somewhat of a concern for Kawhi. But if everything is equal and the game stays close, then Kawhi is going to be one of the better small forward options that's out there on the board. Power forwards, not a lot that I really like here. Dave Lee, no. LaMarcus Aldridge is firing, but his salary has also jumped up in response to that. He's at $7,000. I find it really tough to use him there. Not really interested in that big price rise. He's only gone up by 100 on DraftKings. That's because he started at 6,900, and that still feels just a little bit high for me. For Aldridge, Alex Len, Marquise Chris, tough guys to use there. Centers, Powell is at 6,500. I don't want to spend that on Powell. Phoenix's defense against centers has been pretty good so far. No interest. Tyson Chandler, too volatile, and Dwayne Dedman is at minimum salary. He's giving us 17 points on FanDuel over the last couple of games. In fact, he's giving us 18 on DraftKings at 3,700, but I don't really see the upside in using Dwayne Dedman on this slate of games. The next game we take a look at, we've got the Minnesota Timberwolves and the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets are favored by 4, and the total is 217.5 points. Let's talk point guards. Rick Rubio, 5,800 on FanDuel. We know that point guards against Denver can generally put up some very, very impressive performances. So Rubio's in the gun here. He's at 5,900 on DraftKings, so a little bit higher, and I'm not loving him as much over there. But I'm a fan of him over on FanDuel, where he's averaging 29 points over his last 5 and gets the Nuggets bump here. Manny Mudiay is at 4,800. We don't know what Mudiay we're going to get. Good Mudiay, bad Mudiay. In a tournament, sure, but even then, I don't really believe that it's a really solid bet. Same with Jimmy Nelson and Jamal Murray. Really tough to use those guys. Gaz Harris is at 4,600. Dropped by $100 on FanDuel. Dropped by $200 on DraftKings, but he is okay. He's better than what he's been showing recently, but I'm not sure I'm ready to spend 4,600 on Gaz just at the moment. Zachy Levine at 6,500. I'm all for that. I think you can get 34, 35 out of Levine. The matchup here is pretty good, although Harris does reduce that. But there's a decent argument to be made for using Levine. And you could also make an argument for using Farton Will Barton. He's at 5,700 and he's averaging 34 over the last 3. He's averaging 31 over the last 5. He's had some extra minutes with some stinkers there from Gaz Harris. He's a tough cash guy, I think, to use, but in a tournament, then Barton is absolutely fine to use. That's sort of what he does. He's up and down. His consistency is fairly low, but if he gets the minutes, then there's a chance that he exceeds that sort of return. Andy Wiggins is at 6,300. He's been okay. He's been averaging just a tad under 30 over the last 5. Yeah, not totally loving him here, to be honest. Wilson Chandler, I'm not really loving at all. He's had a significant form dip, and the Roosters had a significant form rise. 6,300 for Danilo Gallinari, averaging 34 over the last 3 games over on FanDuel, so I think he's absolutely in play. He's averaging 38 on DraftKings, and he's still at 5,900, so he is in play on both sites, in my opinion. Power forward Gorgie Jeng had 31 in the domination of the Atlanta Hawks. He's at 5,500, so he's actually seen a salary dip. The matchup is fine. I think that Jeng at 5,500 is someone that you could look at and say, I can get 27 points out of him. I don't think that's too much to expect. He's at the same 5,500 price on DraftKings, and fine to use over there as well. One of the nice mid-priced power forwards. Ken Fareed is strictly a tournament guy. He's at 4,400. He has a higher score in the last 5 of 40 and a lower score of 1. So if that doesn't scream to you tournaments only, I don't know what does. He only plays when Jokic is off the court these days, and that's why it's tough to rely upon him. As for Jokic at $7,000, he had 46 in the last game because he stayed on the court. He's averaging 35 over the last 5. He is a tough guy to use in cash just because of those foul issues, but I'm totally on board with using him in a tournament. Over on DraftKings is at 6,400. That's a great price over there. I think that you can absolutely look at him even more in cash, and of course he's still a tournament option on both sites. At centre, Carl Towns, 9,100. Fine, get your 40 points out of Towns. He's averaging 43 over the last 5, averaging 47 on DraftKings over the last 5, and he's priced at 8,700. Really like him on both sites, and one of the better centre options that is out there on the board. Next up, we're going to look at the Sacramento Kings. They're taking on the Portland Trail Blazers. No spread released at this point. Dame Lillard is listed as doubtful with his ankle, and Aaron Aflalo is questionable with an elbow sprain. Let's talk point guards. Ty Lawson's up to 4,800. He's been putting out some good numbers, 26 over the last 5, but it's strictly tournaments. I don't think you can rely upon him in cash because, as we saw in the last game, they went with Collison for 7 more minutes. Now, Collison wasn't productive, and using him at 4,200 is strictly going to be reduced to tournaments, but if they give Collison the extra run, it's going to limit what Lawson can do, and that's not something we want to be involved in. With Dame out, Shabazz Napier moves into the backup point guard role. He's minimum salary, but I don't really see him with 10 games on. I'm not really seeing him be an awesome DFS type play. Maybe it works out for him, but he could work into some maybe punt option. But I really don't see that being the case. Shooting guard, Alan Crabb's at 3,600. I'm not a massive Crabb fan, as you're well aware, but I don't mind him. I think this is a decent spot to use him, especially in GPPs. He's averaging 17 over the last 3, which at 3,600 is sort of where it needs to be. And I've just got a feeling that with that salary dropping by $400, he's opened up now to be an option. Now, I hated him at the 4,000 that he was at in the last game. 3,600 as a starter who's probably going to get 30, 35 minutes. I can get behind that at that reduced price. Over on DraftKings, he's at 3,700, so actually gone up in salary over there, but still the same sort of thing applies. I like him on both sites, which again is a change in my tune from the other day, but the salary changes help. CJ McCollum, 7,400, had 41 replacing Lillard, so I think you can absolutely use him. Again, if Lillard is out and he's the point guard, we should be expecting a 35-ish type performance from CJ. He's at 7,600. on DraftKings, so that makes it tough. That's an $800 price rise, and yeah, he had 45 in the last game, but there's a bit more risk associated. I'd be more happy with using CJ on DraftKings in a tournament rather than a cash game. Garrett Temple, no. Small forward, Mo Harkless, 5,000. Really like it. This is a good matchup for him. He's going to have to take some extra usage on. Does it defensively. Like him. Evan Turner at 4,700. More a tournament guy to look at, but he's been decent-ish. And you could get 28, 30 out of Evan Turner, and at 4,700 that would work in your favour. Rudy Gay's at 7,200. Had 29 in his first game back. So I don't love him on FanDuel, but when we flick over to DraftKings, he's at 6,300. And that's a much more appealing price, and you could get 35, even 40 points out of Rudy Gay. So I really do like him on DraftKings, not so much on FanDuel. The encouraging thing was in his first game back, he played 36 minutes, so no issues there. Matty Barnes back to a limited role. Power forward, Al-Farouq Aminu's at 4,100, dropped 24 in that first game without Lillard. You should be looking at another 22, 23 point performance. This matchup, power forwards against the Kings go bananas. So Aminu's in a really, really nice spot here. $4,000 on DraftKings as well is a supreme pot price. Like him on both sites if you're going cheap at the power forward spot. Eddie Davis, Noah Vonleh, Myers Leonard, Anthony Tolliver, Omri Caspi. None of those guys should be really touching your lineups. At center, we've got the rematch. We've got the DeMarcus Cousins Myers Leonard rematch. I don't really think that Leonard is going to have too much of an impact, but Cousins is going to be fired up. He's at $11,000. Big men against the Blazers, they can really, really wreak some havoc, and we've seen him do it already. 11,000, 50 plus points. Go Towns. You can easily get, not Towns, go Cousins. You can easily get those numbers off of him. Mason Plumlee, he did well against Boogie, and he's done well against Boogie in the past. And I don't like that he's at 6,600. That's probably pushing it a little bit on FanDuel, but he's still a pretty decent option. He's at 5,700 on DraftKings, so I really do like him more over on DraftKings. But both centers in this play, absolutely worth a look. We saw what they did the last time that they matched up against each other. Hard to use Costa Koufos anywhere, really. All right, let's take a look at the last game of the night, and it is the Toronto Raptors and the Golden State Warriors. The Warriors are favored by 10 points here. The total is 225.5 points, and Terrence Ross is questionable with a sore wrist. Let's talk point guards. Steph's at 8,400. The matchup against Kyle Lowry is not ideal. Steph has struggled to reach his value a lot of times this year. He does. Look, his last 3 games against Toronto has yielded 51 points. I'm just not convinced that this is the right spot to use Steph. You could totally do it in a tournament, but I'm not sold in a cash game setting. Lowry, on the other hand, 8,700 has been crazily good, but that's a very high price. Can you get 43 out of Lowry? Sure. Would I bank on it? No, I'm not keen on Kyle Lowry here. Absolutely worth a look, though. I can totally see doing it. I wouldn't do it. I think there are other better point guards options out there, and eventually he's going to dip. But for now, he is flying. But the Warriors do have some defensive options they can put onto him. Not Steph. Shooting guard, Klay Thompson, 6,300, just really a tournament option. Hate the matchup for him, so he is not worth a look really outside of a tournament. And DeMar DeRozan, 8,600. He could get Klay on him as well. That salary is up by $300 on FanDuel, so I am not really a massive fan of using DeRozan in this matchup either. Where are we at now? Any other shooting guards? No. Ian Clark, Norm Powell. No. Small forward, Andre Iguodala, 3,600. No, he just doesn't produce anything. Kevin Durant, love it here, $10,000. The salary has jumped by $500 on FanDuel, but I'm not fast. I think that 50 points should be coming your way with Durant. Really a really solid guy to look at. The other small forwards, Carroll, Ross, no. Power forwards, Pat, 4,100. Big man against the Warriors. That's a no-go for me there. And the centers. We'll say the same thing about Jonas Valanciunas. We'll say the same thing about Bebe Nogueira. And then the Warriors centers are Zaza Pachulia and JaVale McGee. So I don't really think any of those guys are going to be worthwhile players to put into your DFS lineups. Let's now talk about the picks of the day, because that's all of the games done. So let's bring up the picks of the day now, starting with FanDuel. Matty Dellavedova at 3,900 as a tournament punt. Rick Rubio, 58, and Johnny Wall, 95. Shooting guard Alan Crabb, 36. Zach Levine, 65, and Yanni at 10,300. The small forwards Kid Gilchrist, 47. Otto Porter, 58, and Jim Butler, 85. Power forwards Aminu, 41. Markeith, 5,000, and Anthony Davis, 11,300. The centres Robin Lopez, 47. Marcin Gortat, 6,000. And Dwight Howard, 8,000. On DraftKings, Carter Williams is at 3,000, as I touched on earlier. Reggie Jackson, 52, and Johnny Wall, 95. Shooting guards, Alan Crabb, 37, Zach Levine, 64, and Jim Butler, 84. Small forwards, Mo Harkless, 46, Rudy Gay, 63, and Kawhi at 8,300 is a punt tournament guy. Power forward, Aminu, 4,000, Markeith, 51, and Towns at 8,700. And the centres, Robin Lopez, 48, Marcin Gortat, 57, and Boogie at 11,400. For the Aussies that are listening on Moneyball, Reggie Jackson's 5,000, Ricky Rubio's 54, and Johnny Wall is 95. The shooting guards, Jeremy Lamb, 35, McCullum's at 68, and DeRozan at 82. The small forwards, MKG, 38, the Rooster, 51, and Kawhi at 8,000. Power forwards, Aminu minimum 35, love that. Jeng at 52, and Tony Davis at 10.9. And the centres, Robin Lopez, 47, Dwight at 6,800 is a bargain, and Boogie at 10,500. Draft stars, Alan Crabb, 68, Derrick Rose, 99, and Johnny Wall, 17.8. Shooting guard, Jezza Lamb, 62, Shawnee Kilpatrick, 88, and Jimmy Butler, 14,750. The small forwards, Nick Mirotic, 7,850, Mo Harkless, 8, and Durant, 17.2. Power forwards, Aminu, 7,450, Mace Plumlee, 10.4, and Draymond, 14,650. And the centres, Johnny Lua, 7,150, Robin Lopez, 8,400, and Carl Towns at 16,000. We are done today, guys. Follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Leave a review on iTunes if you could, and check out the rest of the Locked On Podcast Network for your team every day. We are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Patrick Beverley.